So it is now 7:06 p.m. and it's Wednesday, November the 18th, 2020. This is the WRT Board of Directors meeting. So Stuart is present and Marty is present. So I'm now going to start taking a roll at the beginning here and put a check mark beside everybody in the minutes section. So be patient while I do that. It's always nicer to do this now than trying to figure out later who was on. So I show Eric not being here and I show Alita not being here. Are you guys here and I don't see you? Okay, let's begin then. The meeting is called to order. The agenda was out on the shared drive and shared with you. Has everybody had a chance to look at the agenda? If there are no objections, we will consider the agenda adopted. Hearing none, I will click on that item. The board meeting minutes for the October 2020 meeting were out on the shared drive, and you had an opportunity to look at those. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes? Are there any issues that we need to review or change? Seeing none, we will consider those minutes approved. Communications from the public. This month I got an email from Adrian Lomax. Adrian is on the call. Adrian, would you like to speak, or would you like me to read that to the board?
If you'd like to go ahead and read that, that'd be fine.
Okay, will do. Adrian says, it seems to me that there is a major problem with conditioning volunteer and employment opportunities at WORT upon successful investigation by criminal background check. The criminal justice system in this nation is probably the most thoroughly racist institution in our culture. The population of Wisconsin is roughly 5% Black, yet the population of this state's prisons is roughly 45% Black. This is a ninefold overrepresentation. No serious person would contend that African Americans are 9 times more likely than the population at large to become criminals. This disparity is therefore a clear indication of the institutionalized racism that plays such a large role in the operation of our criminal justice apparatus. But don't take my word for it. Ohio State University law professor Michelle Alexander has, in her work, The New Jim Crow, demonstrated that racism plays a major role in decision-making at every level of the criminal justice system. And the groundbreaking work of the University of Wisconsin sociology professor Pamela Oliver has shown that Wisconsin is one of the worst states in the nation in terms of criminal justice system discrimination against African Americans. I submit that conditioning opportunities at WORT upon determinations made by the criminal background justice system will serve to extend the racism that is so prevalent in that institution to our listener-sponsored community radio station. I find this result unacceptable, as the criminal justice apparatus lacks all credibility when it comes to determining who is and who is not a person worthy of working or volunteering at WORT. I urge you to defeat this policy proposal. Thank you for considering my comments. Adrian Lomax. Any comments, questions?
Yeah, Adrian, would you be willing to respond to a question?
Certainly.
What steps then do you think would be appropriate for us to take to protect the volunteer workforce and the physical plant if we can't check in terms of criminal background checks? How can we protect people?
I really don't have an answer for that. I just know that the criminal justice system is not a body that I trust to perform anything, really, because it's so notoriously racist. The system is just racist from top to bottom, and I don't think the WRT should be getting into bed with that.
Do you think it's important that we do take affirmative steps to protect the safety of our volunteer contingent?
Well, I know the shooting incident we had a few years back here was a major traumatic event, and I was very sorry to see that happen. But over the course of the years the WRT's been around, I don't think there's been very many incidents of that nature, and I don't really know, to tell you the truth, I haven't looked into it, if having had the criminal background policy in effect before that shooting would have stopped that from happening.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have a question and a comment too.
Please proceed.
So, I'm not clear exactly, Adrian, if the criminal background check process that we have actually has us getting in bed with the criminal justice system. It's not, I don't believe it's the criminal justice system that's doing the check. We're doing the check, and we're looking at a criminal record. And
checking for results determined by the criminal justice system.
Okay, all right, but you don't have a specific complaint about the criteria that we use and the possibility for an appeal. I mean, lots of places have, when you apply for a job, for example,
Well, actually, when you apply for a job, unless the crime is the criminal offense record of the individual is expressly related to the job, it's actually illegal for employers to consider.
That's right. You're absolutely right.
Actually, that's not right.
I think that it's worth looking at whether our policy operates the same way. I mean, are we discriminating against anyone that has any kind of criminal record, or are there ones? Are we preventing volunteers who have specific kinds of crimes on their records?
Well, there's a list in the proposed draft of the rules, and the list includes crimes against persons and crimes involving destruction of property and theft, and that embodies pretty much everything.
And there's no. I have to admit I should be more up on what the policy is. Was not really involved in framing it. Is there any possibility for appeal?
Wait, so could I correct something? The element of crimes against property has been taken out of the presumed disqualifications. That was a specific action by the Policies and Bylaws Committee in response to comments we got from volunteers. We explicitly took that out from the presumed disqualifications. So I just wanted to correct the record on that.
Well, that is a good thing then.
I would like to step in for a second. This is Dave. The policy also says that anything can be appealed to the staff collective as a whole. So if an individual has been informed that there is an issue which would prevent them from being a volunteer, they can appeal that to the staff collective as described in this policy. And to Rosie Ray's question on chat, what we do with the check is if there is indication of crimes against people, there's a whole list of descriptions in there that describe what we won't permit.
The employment situation was brought up a few minutes ago, and I would say that if the use of background checks and the existence of criminal records were cut back to the level that it's allowed to be used in employment, that would be a big improvement in my view.
I'm not quite sure. Oh, okay, go ahead, Marty, you have a question.
I believe under Walker and the Republican legislature, that provision in the law was removed, and employers are allowed now to use criminal background checks for employment. I can remember where I was at the moment I heard that.
Kurt has a comment.
Yeah, this is an area where I practice in, and so I'm familiar with it. Marty, I'm not aware that Walker repealed any laws that restrict the reliance on criminal background checks for employees who are applying for jobs. The law has been this way since at least the 1980s, that says you cannot use a criminal conviction that's not related to the job, or use an arrest that doesn't result in a conviction unless it's a pending charge. And this may kind of preface something that is later on in the agenda. I won't get into it further now. And Stuart and I and Glenn have kind of gone back and forth on this, but there has not been any recent changes in the law that make it improper to consider criminal conviction records that are related to the job that I'm aware of.
Perhaps then I just heard a report that a bill had been introduced to do that.
Perhaps.
I'm glad it didn't happen.
Yes.
Okay. Now, this is just the communications from the public section of the agenda. That particular policy comes up later on as part of the policies and bylaws committee report in the agenda. So let's, if you don't all mind, pick up that discussion at that point. Sure. Okay. Is that okay with you, Adrian?
Yes, that will be fine.
Okay. There are no executive committee actions that we have to report since the last meeting. So the first committee report is the Treasurers and Finance Committee report that I've combined together in one item. Marty, go ahead.
Okay, we met today as usual. That we meet in the afternoon on the same day as the board meeting. There is a treasurer's report that David put into the packet for tonight, just right before this meeting. I can share the report. I can try to. Can everybody see it? Is it up yet?
It is up.
It is. I had it and I lost it. There we go.
It's continuing good news that we are, as the Finance Committee looked at this and the other financial reports, we have no areas of concern that there's a problem with our finances or we're in anywhere in jeopardy. We did talk about moving some money from the on the top from the Heartland savings into the money management reserve fund, Heartland Reserve Money Management Fund, and I believe I made a mistake in there. I didn't catch it. Instead of $5,634, it is $50,634 in that fund. That we decided not to move the money yet because it's still not definite what's going to be required of that money. It's in the Heartland savings right now. It gets a little bit of interest, but it would get a little bit more if it were in the reserve fund. But as soon as we put it in the money manager, we may incur a fee if we have to take some money out of that. So until we know that there is, that we definitely do not have to pay back that amount of money.
That PPP loan.
Pardon me?
The PPP loan, the Paycheck Protection Act loan is what we're talking about.
Yes, the PPP. We will then move the money into that fund. But if you add 50,000 to the bottom amount on the total funds, it should be correct. I'm kind of embarrassed that I did this because I looked at this over and over, but we are 50,000 ahead of the 448 down there. So we're, or 460 on the right side.
Yep.
The reason I have September in there is we had no, we didn't have the financials finished for September. Sometimes when the meeting is close to the beginning of the month, it's harder for the bookkeeper to get all the reports ready, and she didn't have them ready that time of the last meeting. So
actually, the reason the reports were late was because the pledge drive bridged September and October,
right.
And the credit cards and PayPal amounts were not reconciled in time for the October meeting. That's why September and October were both presented this month. Just wanted to clarify that. It was because of the pledge drive.
It had nothing to do with the efficiency or the performance of staff or volunteers. It was just a glitch that happens once in a while when everything is so close together. So for financial condition, we're in very good condition. We also discussed a small stock distribution that was stock amount that was given to us, and it hasn't been cashed out yet. The treasurer asked us what we wanted to do, and we told her that the policy is that stocks are sold when they're received. So that will happen. I think it's a little over $1,200. A few minor budget adjustments were made, and that we had no problem with. We had no concerns about. And we are also, well, I guess that's it. It's time for, when it's time for action on the upcoming budget, Doug's going to give us a report. He's intimately involved with the budgeting process, and he can answer probably all of our questions on the budget. So I don't know when if you want to do that now, Dave.
Yep, if you're done, then we can pass it to Doug.
I'm done if there aren't any more questions.
Seeing none.
No questions for the treasurer's report or any of the financial actions, finance committee? Okay, I'm done.
Can you stop sharing your screen?
Yes.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
So I guess it's my turn then, huh?
Yep.
All right. Well, I'll start sharing my screen then. Let's see. Screen. Boop. Apparently I'm sharing now.
Yep.
How do I make this go away? You go down here. I don't need you. Let me go into the right page here. Wake up. All right. So here's our 2021 budget. This is the main summary page. And I'll just point out some of the highlights in the budget. One thing you'll notice is that in 2021, we do expect a decrease in personnel costs. I'll go into some of those in a minute. Well, I could go over them right now, actually. With Biden be elected, I think it's pretty safe to say that Glenn will be retiring in June. So we do have figured in a new employee starting in May to do a 1-month overlap with Glenn while we take on a new volunteer coordinator. So obviously for half of the year, there will be a wage reduction there. The other big news in personnel is that our health insurance costs went down significantly this year. The premium costs dropped quite a bit over the course of the year, which is really exciting with no change in coverage. So yay, GHC. On the left-hand column here is the 2021 budget. The center column here is what we budgeted for 2020. And then in the right-hand column is actual numbers that run from the beginning of September of 2019 through August of 2020 to give us a pretty stable 12-month picture of what things actually ran. It's a good spot to do it from because it's before the fall pledge drive. So income-wise, it's very low. Our expenses are pretty stable month to month, but income, even with the evergreens, there's still obviously those income gluts that happen 3 times a year as a result of pledge drive. Actually, 4 times with end of year, because a lot of Susan's budget is also in end of year income. And actually, that's the biggest season for my renewals on underwriting as well. So some of the normal increases, we expect an increase in car fees simply because the car donations have really increased significantly. We're seeing insurance packages come down now that we're moving away from having to have high risk insurance. So these are, pretty stable all the way down. We do expect a large increase in printing costs. You'll see here, pretty significant. Actually, no, it's the same as last year. This is actually what we spent in 12 months. But there has been more printing, especially with more donor letters going out, end of year pitches. There's been a broad range of mailings going out. Equipment costs, equipment purchases, mostly are taken from the engineering page, which is Tom's Corner. Satellite going up. We can just move down the expenses. It's telephone, we're expecting a pretty significant increase, having gone to the new feature phone from TDS, going fiber, and allowing for a lot more call features, especially to facilitate at-home phone answering. If because at least for the winter pledge drive, it's looking like we're going to need to have that capability again. Utility costs, normal 5% increases. The depreciation of 4,000 again. Workman's comp does not appear here because it's included in employee costs above as a lump sum. There's some training money for online webinars. Travel is mostly for runaround cabs for news reporters, primarily to get to locations to cover stories as needed. Program dues and subscriptions going up a little bit. You'll notice that these little numbers over here, that some of these in the expense side, the 5265s and 5263s, these are things that we spend CPB money on. The 63s are the reserve funds, and the 5265s are the unrestricted funds. So restricted, it goes to things like satellite interconnect and program dues and acquisition for things like BBC, Pacifica, all of our canned program that we get from other sources, as well as some news and music programming that we acquire as well, aside from the big ones. We have our audit in here, estimated at 8,600, which would be around what we paid last year with a little bit of an increase. We expect legal fees to go down because we're not in a license renewal year. We did have an inflated budget this year because of the FCC renewal required a lot of extra work in our DC lawyers. Donated services, these zero out with each other on the income and expense side. So we're looking at about 18,000 plus of donated service. Much of which is internet service and things related to programming, which actually will beef up our CPB grant. Premium purchases staying about the same. We are budgeting with projected events amping back up for the summer. Let's hope people stay home for the next 6 months. But there is close to 20,000 in benefit expense, which does include Wortstock. If Wortstock doesn't happen in June, then it's hopefully going to happen in August. There's always an opportunity to reschedule as needed, depending on the virus. So total expenses of 822, a little increase from last year, but really not much. We've had up to 5% increases in years past. So it's a pretty modest increase, which is good because some of the income, obviously on my end, can be a little tougher. Expecting 50,000 in underwriting. Businesses have taken a big hit, so I've decreased underwriting income projections just to play it a little closer, to not expect this great income and then have it not come. So benefits, pretty much all of the benefits other than the usual bar benefits are scheduled for later in the year. So this 53 in income versus the 19,250 in expense is pretty par for the course compared to prior years. Susan on her side has pretty modest increases across the board, other than places that have specific plans in place to get them the increases, but really nothing here is very shocking. The largest increase proportionately really is car donations, but this really has been trending as a major way for people to give, and Susan has also really focused a lot on the on-air campaigns that are being used for car donations, and it's really paid off. And I think we're thinking of submitting one of the car donation ads for an award for underwriting's announcements. And I don't know if that's through WBA, but I only caught a wind of that, just a whiff of that. So, and that would be the De Beers ad, which was wildly popular with listeners. So,
Doug,
yeah.
Did we get the CPB check yet?
We got notice of the EFT. Okay. So the funds will be transferred. You'll notice that the CPB grant did go down just a touch. There's probably $1,000 difference there, a little more, maybe 1,500, but pretty comparable to the prior year. And then bottom line, we're looking at a balanced budget. Woohoo! The other big thing was in the thing that really matters to folks, because on the personnel side, this budget does also include bumped up hours for Aaron in the music department and bumped up hours for Karen in the listener sponsored development department, with her hours being increased to 20. And then Aaron's music hours being increased from 20 to 30. And Dave, let's wait till the end of the meeting to talk about that implication.
Yep.
Or not the end of the meeting, but the end of the budget proposal.
Okay.
Because that does put Aaron at 40 hours per week. And I might as well bring it up now that we may want a memorandum of understanding that his hours are increased due to COVID, and that staff collective membership would be exempt for him working these two positions. He has no desire to be in the staff collective. There is a contract line stating anybody working 40 hours a week is in the staff collective. No one's interested in that happening, including Aaron. So I think a simple MOU would take care of that because of
Doug,
temporary.
Yeah, we could memorialize that in a memorandum so that there's no question next year or the year after of why wasn't this done? So we can explain it.
Great. And right, exactly, because it's always good to have that information going forward. Here's some of the planned projects for 2021 in the engineering department. A lot of this is like pretty usual stuff that we need every year. Then the projects are down at the bottom here, and the STL replacement satellite, is that right? No, studio to transmitter link replacement. Replace several servers, which are much needed. The tech stuff. Carts in combo A really needs a touch screen. You'll notice the next two remote Comrex and satellite dish got pushed to 2021 wish list. So like, these are things like, oh, gee, if we have the money and we're looking at a budget review, maybe some of these things can come into play. But at this time, they are not budgeted expenses. Only this column here, the 42,640, feeds back into the actual budget. We have the DASDEC hardware replacement. The big thing here is the WORT app. Tom has been speaking with a company that works only with nonprofit radio stations to create an app for mobile phones. And this app will be usable both through iStore and Google Play. It will also be compatible with the Apple Car app as well as the Android for Car. So it will really broaden our reach, especially we all feel on staff with younger viewers, especially because the ease of use. We did go through a demo with Tom and the people from this company, and it's very informative, and Tom does have the video if anyone cares to view that, just to kind of see what we're looking at. They craft it to our needs. It's a WORT looking app. It's not something that's, you know, like everybody else's. It'll be unique to us and very adaptable, and they'll do updates as needed for a flat annual fee, so there aren't additional charges along the way. It also has great opportunities for underwriting, so I'm pretty confident that I can help pay for it with the underwriting that appears on it once we get it up and going and get a lot of people downloading it and using it. That's like the big picture. And then here's our bottom line. With the $4,000 in reserve, the reason the net income is less is 4,000 of this is the depreciation. So we got it to balance. Staff is pretty confident about it, and this has been signed off by the finance committee. And then I guess I'll just I'll turn it up to anybody if they have any questions, and I'll stay on share maybe.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question or two, Doug. Starting with the $12,000 for car donation fees, which apparently we get a little more than half of what the value of the donation is as profit. Are the fees based on the value of the donations, or how are those fees arrived at?
It's a percentage of the value of the car at resale value.
Okay.
Let me make sure that that's totally, because I don't think that's just for cars. No, cars is $7,000. The other licenses and fees are other things related, I believe, to credit card processing.
Okay, because it says 12,000 for car donation fees, but that's...
Yeah, on the main page, that's an error, because now that I'm going into Susan's actual page here, it says car fees 7. What I suspect is that something left over from last year's budget that did not get zeroed out in the comments section.
Okay, thank you. Also, I'm confused in line 5166, the legal fees. I don't see what that 5% increase relates to, because 5% on top of 6121 is not 8050. So what does that 5% increase refer to?
5166.
Legal fees, under professional services, legal fees.
Oh, thank you. That's an old note as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So like some of this stuff is unrelated to this year, and I apologize for not deleting those cells.
Okay, so
because we can look at expense overview and see where that actually comes from. So like professional services here, legal fees.
Okay, we didn't have that. The document that you just shared with us, we don't have that document.
That's correct.
Right. These are the like sub
Okay.
tabs. I mean, I'm happy to share the whole thing as a lump for viewing. It's just I didn't want to share the spreadsheet itself because a lot of these are formulas, and I got really nervous about people destroying formulas.
So, but everyone thinks that the 8050. What is 2020 actual going to ultimately be? Do you think it's going to be close to that 14,550, or is it going to be closer to that 6,100?
I can jump in with that real quick. Don't know yet, because a lot of that increase was due to the FCC licensing that's coming up. We haven't gotten the final bill from Foster Garvey yet for that whole thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think what we did for the purposes of 2021 is we went back to 2019 and then just kind of bumped that number up a little bit.
Okay.
Since that was a more standard year regarding needs for lawyers.
Okay. And since your business is so intimately related to whether or not there are events, you're comfortable with the projections you've got is for income coming in, not knowing really when things are going to open up?
Yeah, I think for right now, I need to plan for things to open back up and then review them in June when we do our budget review.
Okay. And do I understand you to say that if events don't open up, not only will that reduce income, it will also reduce expenses?
Yes, exactly, because then obviously that $19,000 won't need to be spent. And yeah, and it's interesting too, because I mean, for Wartstock, money's already exchanged hands on the 2020 event. So like I have deposits out to vendors, and likewise I have food and craft vendors that have sent me deposits. So we're kind of keeping that all on account until we figure out just exactly what we're going to do.
And finally, on Aaron's position, since we only see a single line on personnel total, is that going to reduce? Presumably, that will reduce the amount of overtime that we've been paying if we bump up his standard hours.
Well, we haven't been paying overtime because he doesn't work more than 40 hours combined.
Okay.
Right. So basically, this is going from 30 hours of combined hours between promos coordinator and music assistant. That's being bumped to 30 hours of music assistant, 10 hours of promos. And, quite honestly, the way the workload's going, it's actually a little more like 35 and 5 because there's, not a lot of promos work right now. That's kind of rising and falling depending on, what comes in for promo exchange. But obviously he and Sybil are both, well, I mean, you saw their reports. They're both incredibly busy just keeping the music programming going.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions?
I'll just comment that the FCC application for our license renewal has been signed and sent to the FCC. So now we're just waiting for the FCC to respond to the application. So,
woohoo, Shampers.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing for now. Boop. Hi, everybody. So I don't know if you want to take over for a vote, Dave.
I want to ask for further discussion or questions about the budget. Hearing none, this is a committee recommendation, a finance committee recommendation, so a motion is not needed. So I would like to take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions? Rosie, are you okay with this? Marla?
Yes.
Okay.
I would be if I could unmute.
Oh, okay.
I'm like, aye, and no one heard me.
Okay. Thank you.
Sorry.
All right, we will consider the budget adopted. I'm going to go over here and check it. Okay.
You'll excuse me if I smoke after that.
Yes.
That was a lot.
For board members, the September and October financial reports are out in the shared drive. I did not link them to the agenda because there's 8 of them, so that's a lot to deal with. And you are forgiven if you don't want to go and look at the actual line items of the budgets, but I want to make sure that we're transparent, so it's there. The programming committee report is next on the agenda. And I don't think that there's an action item there. Unless there's any questions, we can move on. I see no hands or excitement, so I will move on.
I do have a question about the program committee. Is the thought in terms of moving of Democracy Now! To the morning, is there a thought that there's some, what is the initiative for that? Is there a thought of putting something else at 5 to 6, or why is that in play to begin with?
Well, the concern is that by the time 5 o'clock rolls around, the early morning Democracy Now! Is kind of outdated on many days. And so the concern is to make it contemporaneous.
Okay, thank you.
No action is necessary by the board on that. Policies and Bylaws Committee report. This is where the draft background check and reporting policy for volunteers and board members is up for discussion. The Policies and Bylaws has looked at that, and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion group has looked at that, and so Policies and Bylaws recommends adoption. Is that right, Stu?
Yeah, and DEI has also endorsed it unanimously based on the changes we made following the comments we received from volunteers.
All right, discussion. Any questions, comments? I will make a comment as the board president. When the shooting occurred, a whole bunch of things happened in the few weeks after that. But the thing that happened that was most affecting us is that the insurance company that held our liability policy decided at the end of that year not to renew our policy, and there was a threatened lawsuit that never happened. But as a result, the insurance company asked a lot of questions about us and asked about our background check policy and asked about how we keep track of our volunteers. And there were a lot of questions, and we became a lot more aware of that issue. So that is in part what prompted this. We did not finally get our liability insurance until like December 28th of that year. And my fear was that if we did not get a renewal policy for liability coverage, that I didn't think we could keep operating as of January 1 that year. So that to me seemed like a pretty important issue to deal with. So we're feeling our way with this policy, and I think that the safety valve that we have for that is that the staff collective as a whole can review the decisions that they make based on the background check report. So, other discussion?
Kurt, do you want to raise the issue of whether or not the EOC ordinance applies, and we can discuss that?
Well, are we now discussing the volunteer background check policies?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have concerns with that, and I've echoed them with Glenn and Stuart. So, as I said, I practice in this area, and under current law, if you're an employee, there's a distinction drawn between convictions and arrests. And if you're convicted for something in one of the areas that are indicated, and I have no problem with those areas, then that can be considered as a factor as to whether you can get the job. If you're arrested as an employee, that is kind of forbidden, that you can make inquiries into an employee's arrest record. And the reason for that, I think, goes back to kind of the constitutional principle, innocent until proven guilty. The theory is that if you're an applicant for an employee, or if you're an employee applying for some other job, if you were arrested for something but not convicted, that should not be held against you in any way to advance as an employee or to be hired as an employee because you were not convicted. It's just an arrest. And so the law makes that distinction. And my kind of understanding is that we attempt to apply the same legal principles to volunteers as we do employees. And so to say for that volunteers, including board members, must report an arrest, a past arrest, and I distinguish between an arrest where there's a pending investigation going on and some past arrest. To say that you have to report that, I think kind of creates a double standard between employees and volunteers, including us, to say that if you're arrested for something, if you've been arrested 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or even recently for something, you have to report that. And presumably actions would be taken adversely to either a volunteer. If an employee, if a volunteer reports some arrest 5 years ago for something, then that would be held against the volunteer in the same way as a conviction. If a board member would be arrested for something and it doesn't result in a conviction, board members would have to report that, and presumably that could be held against them in some way to say, for example, that maybe a board member couldn't hold the board because they were arrested for something. And I just think that kind of is inconsistent with the principles that the same principles should apply to employees as volunteers, and this whole idea that if you're arrested for something, that should not imply that you're not fit to be a volunteer. And I understand in talking to Glenn and to Stuart that the concern is, well, what will the insurance company think? Would they deny coverage on an example where, say, a volunteer who wasn't required to report arrests did something bad, and we sought insurance coverage for it, and they would come back to us and say, well, you didn't seek the arrest record of the volunteers. You sought the conviction record, but not the arrest record. Therefore, we are denying you coverage. Certainly that's possible. It seems to me it's really highly unlikely that would happen. And if that's a real concern, perhaps what we should do is call the insurance company and ask them. But just to establish this policy of, an arrest of any volunteer must be reported, I think that is just bad policy. And I think it could deter, as Adrian pointed out, and I think there's basis for that to say it might deter minorities who have arrest records but not conviction records necessarily from applying for positions.
Okay.
Stuart?
Kurt, just to clarify, at this point, you're discussing the policy, not a legal application of the city ordinance to the volunteer status. I just want to make sure.
Well, that's something that, in the dialogue that took place, I initially started with a state law, and then I looked at the Madison Equal Employment Law, which, in my view, I think is a little more ambiguous. Certainly, the state law only applies to employees. Okay. The Madison ordinance says any person, and arguably you could say a volunteer is any person.
But it's under the heading employment practices. It's within the employment context.
Right,
but
right.
no,
So, it's an undecided issue. Yeah. I just raise that as, do we really want to have some volunteer, file a lawsuit against us under the Madison ordinance saying you've discriminated against me because I have some arrest record from 5 years ago? I don't think so.
Let me continue. Just to clarify, Kurt, you can ask for information regarding an arrest record that relates to a pending charge.
Certainly, yes.
Okay, so if we eliminated arrest record and had pending charges or convictions, would you be satisfied with the policy as it stands?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
We went around and around on this, and that's a legitimate argument. If in fact, I don't think we were thinking of old arrests. We were thinking of a contemporaneous arrest where a charge had not yet been filed. If we're not thinking, would you be satisfied if we clarified that the arrest was not for something which had maybe too awkward to file? I mean,
well, I think, yeah. So in the first part of the policy, when we talk about prospective volunteers, Kurt, those are the people that are coming on almost like in a recruitment process, as you're thinking, right? And our understanding was, and our policy is written in a way that says that people who are convicted of these crimes would be presumed disqualified. We don't even say it's not allowed. We just say it's presumed disqualified, but we do only use the word conviction. Then as you get further down, we started to talk about that arrest, or we can change it to pending charges, because they're already, and I'm just putting my air quotes up, employees. And so in my experience, it was okay to ask an employee if they've been arrested or there's pending charges, to let your employer know. And I get the point where, it could be presumed that somebody would take an adverse action against them, but that wasn't, that's not the intent of this policy. So I get where you're coming from. Our intent was to say, let us know in case there's something, we need to know, we need to do. If I get arrested for beating up, some kid on a bus, would you want to know that? Because I'm going to be in the news and people are going to look my name up and I'm going to be a WORT board member. At least we could be ahead of the game. And I think that's kind of what we were looking at. We were not in any way saying we were going to make a decision based on an arrest. But I do understand what you were saying in terms of that there could be a presumption that there would be a decision or an adverse action taken on an arrest, but that was not our intention.
Yeah. Well, the way it reads is that it's just arrest. I have no problem, and the law is that if it's a pending charge, that's fair game.
Okay.
They should disclose that.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
I think maybe that the procedure that would be best would be for the board to refer this back to policies and bylaws. What do you think, Stu?
No, this is what a board meeting is for, to have this discussion and debate it. I don't think it needs to go. I mean, we had a discussion at policies and bylaws. It was referred to DEI. I'm perfectly comfortable with this being ready for the board. The question is it a functional reality that there would be a meaningful and legitimate arrest that did not in a fairly, what we were concerned about was a legitimate arrest that took more than a brief period of time to mature into a pending charge. I mean, that's the situation that we were concerned with. We certainly are not concerned with somebody got arrested 5 years ago and no charges were filed. We're concerned with somebody's arrested on Monday, they've got a shift on Tuesday, and the DA doesn't file a charge until Thursday. That's the issue. And the question is it a meaningful reality that situation could occur? That's the issue that we were dealing with.
Yeah, and to that, I would say that is something that should be disclosed because it's a pending arrest.
But it's not a charge yet. That's the point. We're in that interregnum between the arrest and the filing of the charge. That's the point we're trying to deal with.
No, but if you've been arrested and the charge hasn't been dropped in some sense, then it's still a pending charge. So if you've been arrested on Monday and not charged until Thursday, I think you would still be required to report that as a pending arrest. It hasn't been finally disposed of. So if we could just clarify the policy just to apply to pending cases as opposed to past arrests that did not result in a conviction, that would be fine.
I don't practice criminal law. What is the reality of if somebody's arrested, is that necessarily a charge being filed?
See, I'm not a criminal attorney either. But if it's an arrest that has not been finally disposed of in some way, I think that's pending.
So if it said all other pending charges, arrests which have not been disposed of, and convictions?
Sure, something like that was fine.
Okay, I'm happy with that. And that eliminates those things that from 5 years ago that were dropped, that were either a political issue or something bogus.
But wait, if you're saying arrests, pending charges, then that still has that.
Arrests which have not been disposed of, pending charges or convictions.
Yeah, that's fine.
Works for me.
Works for me.
How do we get the correct language in the document that we're voting on?
Well, I'll move to amend where where it says under Roman numeral 1, prospective volunteers, where it says requires review, amended to read all other arrests which have not been disposed of, pending charges and convictions, and replicate that language in under current volunteer reporting and the board members. Just the phrase arrests which have not been disposed of, pending charges or convictions. I think that's a fine resolution.
I'm typing extremely slow, so you'll have to repeat that for me.
Okay. Under requires review under prospective volunteers, all other arrests which have not been disposed of, pending charges and convictions. Then under current volunteer reporting,
I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm a slow note taker. Can we revise this and bring it to the board next month, or can we revise it with this and then you submit an amended thing after the meeting?
Aren't we recording?
We are.
So couldn't we move to use the recording to update the notes?
We could do that.
Is there some way, Marla or Stu, that we can share the document and make the change in it like we did during our meeting? We could all see it?
It does, the document that is in if I open it with Google Docs.
I think it's hard to write by committee.
I agree.
But it's just a substitution of a phrase. So if you could see it, maybe you would.
I tell you what, why don't we table this? I will put the language in and then we'll go on to some other stuff. And then we'll come back to this in 5 or 10 minutes when it's all typed in. How's that?
Sure.
Thank you, Stu.
Okay. Any objections? Seeing none, moving on. The next item is the Personnel Committee. And the Personnel Committee did send an email to the staff to notify the staff of the intent of the Personnel Committee to begin doing check-ins, which is our the committee talking to each employee, seeing if they have the resources that they need, and any other issues that come up. That has been done, and so no action by the board is required. I'm just informing them what happened. The engineering committee report is in the tech and facilities report, so we'll deal with it there. I still don't know what happened about the community advisory board. Glenn, do you know about that? Was there action recently on the community advisory? Oh, Megan Flowers, you're muted, Megan.
Hi, yes, I'm the board liaison for the community advisory board. I did attach that PDF to the November meeting folder, the September 30th minutes that were approved at that time.
Okay, I missed that, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I did it kind of late. Yeah, so basically that, those approved minutes were going over, I think last time it was like, oh, that was back in June, the last minutes that were approved. And at this one on September, we were updating them quite a bit on, first ever virtual meeting, new board members, various promotional exchanges, various programming reports offered by Glenn. I talked a little bit about the diversity, equity, inclusivity work group and updated them on that a bit, which I'll also do later here. And new business, including CAB wanted to give just a heartwarming just round of applause for how well WORT has been just working through everything given the pandemic. And they also were pointing out that resources for musicians and musician support, like via grants, are being distributed on WORT, and we're appreciative of that. And then Glenn invited a applicant, Mike Ivy, to the next meeting, and so he joined the October 28th meeting. But more to come on that meeting at the next one in December. But yeah, that's basically it. Our first one before was just kind of a meet and greet, and this is kind of getting everybody up to date. So that's pretty much it for CAP. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And I just wanted to add that at the last meeting, Mike Ivy joined us, but he wanted to just sit through a meeting before he wanted us to consider his membership. So we're going to look at his application and talk to him at the next meeting, which is November 30th. And the one thing that the CAB did was 5 individual CAB members commented on the background check policy. So we asked if the CAB wanted to make a resolution as a group, as opposed to just individual CAB members, about the proposed draft. And so there was a resolution, and that language was passed on to policies and bylaws and incorporated into their suggestions. But overall, they thought the policy was fine. There was one section where they had a few wording changes, additions, whatever, and those were adopted by the policy and bylaws. And I sent that on to Doug, because when he does his CPB reporting, he's asked when the CAB advised the board. So the CAB advised the policy and bylaws, which is a committee of the board, on that date of their meeting. And we passed that language on to policy and bylaws, and Doug will know to report on that.
Thank you.
Which I've already done, because that was actually part of the grant acceptance questionnaire that I had to fill out when we got our grant, which we just got approved for. So they're sending us $67,000 in the next 5 days.
Great. And I'm glad you got all the information in time about that resolution.
Thank you.
I've got the language done.
Thank you. Do you want to share your screen?
It's not on this machine.
Okay.
I've typed it into the Google Doc, which has gone to reports, but I'm not sure. At this point, maybe the simplest thing for me to do is just read the phrases slowly. And then you'll have the recording. I think it's pretty clear. So let me just do that. Under prospective volunteers, Roman numeral 1, where it says requires review, amend the language to read, all other arrests which have not been disposed of, pending charges and convictions, and then require review or consensus vote by the staff collective. Where it says current volunteer reporting, amend the language to read, any volunteer with an arrest which has not been disposed of, a pending charge or conviction for any of the following offenses, so on and so forth. And that language repeats in the applicants for the board of directors and the current board member. So it's an arrest which has not been disposed of, a pending charge or a conviction. And I think that addresses the concern that Kurt was raising.
Yeah, I agree. I think it addresses the areas where that's mentioned.
Okay. So I would move that amendment.
Adrian, did you see the language that was sent out recently? And do you have any other comments about the policy, the language as amended tonight?
I do have some comments I'd like to make. If I could return for a moment to what Stu asked me at the beginning about if I had any other ideas for policies that could be used to protect the staff. The shooting that occurred, the perpetrator of the shooting was a former show host who was aggrieved over the fact that he had been dismissed from his show. And he felt like the guy that he shot had something to do with the reason he got dismissed. So he was an aggrieved former show host. And he came in at 3 o'clock in the morning with no forced entry. So he came in just by using his access code. That situation could have been resolved by having a policy of simply frequently changing the access code. And one thing on the language that you're discussing about the resolution of an arrest, I do know quite a bit about the criminal justice. And when you get arrested for something, except in the case of an arrest warrant, which is made by a district attorney, a police officer makes a decision to arrest you for something, and a district attorney then reviews the police officer's report and decides whether to file charges. If you get arrested for something, and a district attorney decides not to file any charges, you don't get a letter from the district attorney. There's no announcement made that arrest was resolved. It just goes on and on with no action ever being taken by the district attorney. So saying an arrest has to be resolved before something can before a decision can be made is problematic.
Well, then
I do need to jump in and clarify a couple of things. One, the identity of the shooter has never been established. No arrest has ever been made on the shooting. So we still don't know who it was. And secondly, at that point, there were no codes on the doors on the front door. That was before we had a code system.
No, we didn't have codes at that point.
I was a late night host at that time, and there was definitely a door code at that time.
There was?
Absolutely.
Yeah. We added those after.
No, we were doing codes then. But the two of the people who were involved in the shooting did state that the person who was the shooter did not resemble the former host. There was an interview that was done by Good Morning America and Channel 27 WKOW, And the Good Morning America people really did a lot of background research on the case, and they asked the question directly: was the shooter Gatto? And Boss Lady and Eugene said no, that was not the case. So
that's the code of the street thing there.
The case is still open, and I don't think we should be discussing an open court case in a public board meeting. I think it's inappropriate.
Okay. In any case,
if I might add one other thing, with regard to changing the access codes, it should be done frequently, but it should especially be done after a show host is dismissed and he's aggrieved by it.
That was done, but so somehow that happened despite the code changing. So, sorry. I understand your concerns, and we have all agonized a lot about that incident. I have especially. So I don't exactly know what we could do about this, but one of the things we could do is do a different security system where everybody has individual codes, and then we would know by looking at the codes who made the entry. But
that's kind of not the issue,
right?
We're not talking. I mean, that's not the issue,
right? It's not a security issue. It's the issue of the background check policy. I also am aware that it is illegal under the Madison ordinances to discriminate based on arrests or convictions. So go ahead, Stu.
The two lawyers in the room think that this language comports with the Madison Equal Opportunities Ordinance.
Correct. I agree. Further discussion. Board members, do you have any questions? Are we ready to vote on this amended policy? Hearing no objections, I would like to proceed. All those in favor of approving this background check policy, hang on a second. I'm going to have to open up another notepad here to make notes. All in favor of accepting these background check policies, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Says aye.
All opposed, say no.
Oh, thank you.
Are there any abstentions? Gil,
Rosie abstains.
Trying to talk. Rosie, did you have a question?
Nope, I abstained.
Oh, Rosie abstained. Okay.
I just want to say, I think the policy got a lot better through the committee review and the volunteer comments. And I think it was improved further by this board discussion. So I think the board and the committee and the volunteers all functioned really well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I want to personally thank Kurt because he echoed a lot of the concerns that I had since the beginning of the discussion at staff. And that was with prior arrests, because I felt like, innocent until proven guilty. I am a huge proponent of that. So.
And frankly, that was, we weren't thinking about that at all. So thank you for bringing that up.
So
and the amended version is in the Google Docs that's been shared with reports.
Thank you. I just want to review this because this one is an important one. So I have as ayes Stu and Doug and Kurt and Marla and Alita and Marty all voted aye, and Rosie abstained.
Did you count Megan?
I voted aye.
Thank you. And I voted aye. So thank you.
Yeah, some people were muted. Gilman is muted and Marla is muted. Did you count Gilman?
Yeah, I did vote aye.
Thank you.
I think it was unanimous, but for Rosie's abstention.
Correct. I want to make sure that everybody was on record correctly, that I didn't make a mistake. I've lost my place. I'm sorry. Please be patient with me. Thank you. Okay. The Technology and Facilities Director report has 3 action items. The first item is a request to allow Rock and John to be in the studio for his 45th anniversary show in December. The protocols would be the same as when he was allowed in during the pledge drives. John and the staff are very comfortable with how everything was handled, and it's a pretty big deal to get John in doing his show live. That does real well for that pledge drive. Again, pardon me while I go slow. So, board, how do you feel about approving Rock and John to come in for the pledge drive? Any discussion? We will go over the COVID policy later in the meeting, and that policy will apply to this situation. It'll also apply to staff operations currently. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions? There are 2 other items, and we'll go over the COVID protocols and procedures later in the meeting. And Shally is bringing up a question about bringing a second volunteer engineer into the station for the 6 o'clock news. So we'll go over that at the appropriate time in the agenda. So that finishes the engineering and the tech and facilities report. In the business and events report, which Doug did, I have the draft agenda there. We actually approved it earlier in the Finance Committee report, so we don't need to vote on that now. The listener sponsor development report is next. I'm quickly bringing that up because I
believe that just echoed the Rock and John, which we already voted on.
Right. And the WORT birthday boost is the next item, the next fundraiser. We have a December 4th and 5th, which is close to our December 1st birthday. So, so that's all we have to talk about for listener sponsor and that report. taking a quick look at the music report, and I don't see any items here.
Oh, there was one had a course. Oh yeah, Sybil's not here, so but I was curious what the uncertainty about Brian on Tuesday morning, because I think he's doing an outstanding show. So I was just curious what the unresolved issues were. Doug, do you know anything about that?
No, the only thing I don't know is if he intended on going long term with every week.
Oh, okay.
Like it may be a circumstance where he wants every other week off. Although I can't. I mean, don't quote me.
Okay.
But that's like the only thing I could think of
Okay.
is just his intent for doing it every week.
So I think he's doing a great. It's one of my favorite shows already. He's a great programmer.
Okay.
I have a question about two other reports.
Please proceed.
Just both Sybil and Susan referred to this Madruganes money that's missing. I don't really understand it. That it was unreceived pledges, or it was. I mean, I can read you the part in the report. If you guys have read the report, you would know what I'm referring to. But Susan says in her report, let me find it. That oh no, I can't see it. March. Well, there's another thing in Susan's report that I wanted to ask about. I mean, she's brought this up before. I just wonder whether it's worth. Under her major donor paragraph, she says it's not an action item request, but she says having the board or the board and staff together come up with a portfolio of projects that we would like to implement, but have them because we don't have the funds would be immensely helpful to my fundraising. I just wanted to point it out. It's something. Susan has said similar things about this in the past, and past years, and I just wonder whether it's something that anybody else wants to comment on. I guess not. Okay.
Usually the board doesn't come forward with projects. Usually the staff comes and the board approves. But yeah,
that's fine.
Yep.
I just wanted a response because she, yeah. If that's the deal, then I guess we'll just wait.
Okay.
And in somewhere in Susan's report, she refers to something that Sybil also talked about. Money that was, there's a section in Susan's report that talks about money they're still trying to get that was pledged.
Unfulfilled pledges for the past year.
Yes, unfulfilled pledges. And there's that one specific comment about, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. The show, it's a Latin show, and she lists specifically the donors that haven't paid up.
I'm not seeing that at all. I'm looking right at the report. I don't see that what you're talking about at all, Gilman.
Okay. Well, I read it when I read it before.
Maybe it's in Sybil's.
Unfulfilled pledges.
Right. I see that.
5 lost unfulfilled pledges. Third paragraph. 5 Los Madrugadores donors account for 1050 of unfulfilled pledges. Now do you see it?
No, I see the unfulfilled pledges for the past year that I see on Susan's report for November 2020, just as one paragraph that begins, we have $5,310 in unfulfilled pledges.
We're looking at different reports then.
Yeah.
I'm looking at October.
Ah.
Okay.
I don't know why. That's what came up when
Okay.
So does that mean that that's been dealt with?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, I mean, you can only deal with unfulfilled pledges so much. I mean, you can make a phone call and say, hey, you can send a letter, but ultimately a pledge is a pledge. Promises are broken every day.
I believe Sybil's comment was in regards to some announcements that were not official underwriting.
That's a totally different issue, and it's one that staff is handling.
Right, but she did report it. She did report
I'm,
it in her report.
Yes, she did.
All right. Well, I'm glad staff's handling it, so we shouldn't. I'm just curious. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah.
If you think
no.
we don't need to talk about it, then forget it.
No, I mean, it's potentially a legal issue, but it's one we're investigating, and it's also inspiring Sybil to seek FCC laws in other languages so that we can expand our literature that we give to prospective volunteers so that the lines are really clear on what you can and cannot do on the air, because the FCC has kind of failed in that respect, according to some of the reaching out she's done on NFCB. So it is an issue that we're aware of, and it's being dealt with.
So Susan did mention in her report that there were 111 donors that have unfulfilled pledges, and there are some staff and board members on that list of 111. And I may be one of the culprits, or my wife Danielle, and so I'm hoping to get a letter, if that's the case, saying, hey, you made 10 pledges during the last drive and you fulfilled 9 of them. Where's that last one? So whatever. So our next report is the News Talk and Public Affairs report. And the action item there is to bring a volunteer engineer into the station. Mel of Mel and Floyd is willing to do some engineering for the 6 o'clock news block, as well as engineer the Mel and Floyd show, which is Fridays at 1 p.m. And this wouldn't be volunteer. Well, I guess I can't quite say that. He would be a volunteer programmer on Friday, but this is a special exception because he's doing the engineering of a live show, which can only happen at the station. So the question is, will the board approve bringing Mel in as an engineer 5 days a week? This would be a volunteer position. There's no money associated with this. It's just the question of bringing in a volunteer when the station is closed, and we have to approve that.
It's Ken. It's not Mel. It's Ken.
Right. Mel is the air name. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So move.
Don't have to move. It's a report. So are there any questions?
No, you got to move it. You got to move it.
Yeah, it's not the same as a committee, Dave.
It's a staff request. It needs it needs motion.
Thank you.
My opinion is if the staff is comfortable with it, knowing the risks they're facing and the safety measures that have been put in place, that I will support it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can say from a staff perspective that we are definitely unanimous about this need and how great it is, especially to keep Shali healthy. Yeah. Shali right now is working way too many hours, and there's no break in her day. Like some days she's going from 7 in the morning till well after 8 at night, and that's just not sustainable. This would significantly impact her hours, as you saw from her report, but it also reduces the stretch of time that she needs to be at the station, which is also important because working splits is kind of a drag. And she's engineering at 8 in the morning 2 days a week. So, being there doing the news at 6 at night is just it's just too much. And we all know that Mel is a hermit like I am. So we don't have big concerns about one individual coming in 5 times a week. Many of the staff do not have overlapping hours with the news block. Most of us are gone by then or working from home anyway. So this still would not increase the number of people in the station to any more than 4 at a time. So.
And I'm here to lobby on this too, on the phone, if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
We can. I'm just advocating for you.
I heard you. That was a great job. Thank you, Doug. I'll just add that it is the length of time, but it's also I don't know if you mentioned this, but this is a backup. If I get sick or if Dylan gets sick, we live in the same household, that's a huge liability. Jonah could maybe cover it, but it's not really in his job flow. That's asking a lot more for him, and he wouldn't be able to do it every day. The news collection process is unwieldy, and trying to do all of that and engineer it is not sustainable. So, and we've never asked the producer to engineer every single day. So I'm trying to build up a backup for that show. The Buzz has a backup with Doug and Tom. APA has a backup with Rochelle and Tom and Aaron. But the news, which is significantly different than any other show we do and a lot more fast-paced, I need a reliable person, not only to free me up during my day-to-day, but also just to in case someone gets sick. And, I understand that there is a small risk involved. I think it's one worth taking, and I don't usually say that in the time of COVID, but I think this one is because Mel doesn't go out. He wants to do it. He's retired and he has the time. I think this would be a good opportunity.
Thanks, Shelley.
Yeah, thank you. Stu, did you make a motion to approve this?
Stu moved.
So, okay, do I second that or what?
Yes, Marla
I'll
seconded.
second it.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. Are there any noes? Are there any abstentions? I will consider this unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you for finding your help.
Yes.
I really appreciate the board support.
We appreciate you and everybody there.
Okay. Next item is a volunteer and outreach report from Glenn. As I see it, there were no action items there. Is that right, Glenn? You're muted. So.
That's correct. There's no action items. And I did send out a email this afternoon that at the Community Shares Board meeting this morning, there was a unanimous vote by the board to approve the distribution of the $80,000 collected in the Fund for a Just Recovery. It was set up when the pandemic hit, and the idea was to offset pledges from last year that might not come in for workplace giving. And so far, it looks like the pledges are coming in. And so CUNA Mutual was a main donor to the Fund for Just Recovery, and they were all under the understanding, everyone who contributed to that was under the understanding that the 100% of what they contributed would go to member agencies. And so there's going to be an even split between the 60, I think it's 66, 64, 65, I forget the exact number, member agencies. And so we will get a sum of $1,250 by ACH in November. So that's good news.
It is.
A nice little bump.
It is. Thank you. We next go to the COVID-19 task force. And the report is right here in the agenda. While the station remains closed to volunteers, the COVID-19 task force recommends adoption of the following items. And those include a check-in, check-out log, a cleaning log, a cleaning policy, a cleaning procedure checklist, and a hygiene and illness policy. Those items were taken from the recommendation of the Dane County City of Madison Health Group and was modified for WORT by Arlene Zaucha, who is a nurse, and by Tom Jones, who is our tech and facilities director, so that it is rewritten specifically with WORT in mind. We've been informally following those procedures ever since they were approved. And the purpose of this being on the agenda is to formally adopt them as the board. We're still not opening the station to volunteers, and there may be changes as we learn more about COVID-19, but in the meantime, we'd like to have these formally approved by the board. Are there any questions or comments or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor of adopting these items, say aye or raise your hands.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any in opposition? And are there any abstentions? Thank you. The diversity, equity, and inclusion report was just recently added, and I haven't had a chance to review that yet. Megan, would you have a minute to talk about that?
Yeah, the way it's formatted, it might actually be best to verbally, but I do apologize for getting that late to everyone. Yeah, so we met last week, and over the past couple of meetings, we have actually kind of backpedaled a little bit. We've been doing a little bit of reading through the National Federation for Community Broadcasters guideline on DEI, as well as other, I know a number of staff members and other volunteers had looked at other resources, including webinars. And from there, we talked about how to structure this and have a common understanding of visioning and the resources needed and consensus making for such. And so we came up with a nice toolkit to use and had a volunteer actually help us with the facilitation. Dan Lippitt has offered his services to be a facilitator for helping us work through some of this collective visioning on what we envision DEI to look at WORT, and so we've been working a lot of initial groundwork in terms of some guiding questions that will help us build common understanding, identify indicators for success in the short term and long term, determining areas where research and technical support is needed, supporting future efforts, and using this model to communicate about the project to project participants. And this is Dan Lippitt's doing this through a logic model. So it's really helping us build our common understanding around problem statements and strategies and the assumptions that we're making around these strategies and the outcomes and impacts. And so some of those grounding questions are like, what are the conditions in which we're gathering for DEI? What is our critical path? What will WORT look like if this initiative is put in place? What sorts of actions will help us reach this vision? What are the 3 things we would need to learn and acquire and know? Who are the participants? What are the strategy activities? And so this is something we worked through quite a bit at last meeting. We started a bit at the meeting before that, but we worked through quite a bit of it and got through and then at the next meeting we're going to look at some of these answers we've all provided, and in the meantime, we're fleshing out our answers and looking at additional resources to review, including Susan had pointed us to public media resources, and so we'll be reviewing that as something that might be of assistance to us as we move along with our visioning and building and then eventually building a vision statement and goals and being able to present that to the board, and the logic model being a lovely way to present that to WORT, the organizational structure. And Alita has actually pointed us to using Padlet, which is a wonderful tool to help us all just collaborate through this. So thank you, yay teachers and their collaboration tools that they show us. So this has been very helpful. And if anybody else from the DEI working group who's here who feel like I missed something, please chime in and let me know. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So that brings to an end staff and committee reports. I have no new business unless somebody has something that they haven't brought up yet.
I actually have something, and it just occurred to me today, and I did not have time to get it into the agenda. But it is the November meeting, which means the holidays are coming up. And by the time we have a December board meeting, it's going to be a little tight to request this, but it is an annual request that that staff does every year. And I'm sure the collective members who are on the call along with me will agree. I would like to make a motion to spend $600 so that each of our part-time staff could have a $100 bonus for the holidays. It's something we do every year.
Second.
So I have to learn how to spell again. All in favor of the holiday bonus plan, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. Are there any abstentions?
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah, I figure I'd get it out of the way now because I don't know, I haven't looked at payroll and how close to the actual holidays it is. So this just makes things easier for Suzanne. So thanks a lot.
I have a closed session on the agenda. If any board members think we need to go into closed session, we will do that now. But if there's no need expressed, then we can skip that item. Board members, how say you?
They skip it.
I got nothing.
I got nothing.
Nothing.
Okay, then we will not do a closed session. Motion to adjourn is welcome.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Was that Marla?
Yes, it is.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say no. Oh, Stu voted twice. I think that's fraud. We should.
Yuck, yuck.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
County.
Good night.
That was an awful lot of work for an hour. Damn.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Stay safe.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, guys. Good night.
Don't go
Good night.
nowhere.
Yeah.